Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the EuroShow, TIS's Euro time zone show. Obviously, if you're watching the VOD of this is not specifically just for a particular time zone. You can watch it whatever time zone you're at.
And as many times as you like.
Exactly. And I recommend that in actual fact. So, quick thing, we're going to do a quick summary of what we did last show. Last show we actually, let me just pull my notes up. Last show we checked out Eve's new website, like the new section of the website. There's been, positives and negatives to that. Some of the sort of functionality of that is only sort of a little bit skin deep, whereas it should be a little bit deeper, sort of a little bit more sort of care and thought and kind of general sort of work sort of put into it, maybe a little bit more, but we'll see how that develops, how that goes.
Yeah.
The
CCP back catalog, old stuff, please. Put the old stuff in.
Yes, very much so. We did we checked out CCP's sword ceremony, where a bunch of CCP staffers got various different swords for their term of service in as CCPs, I believe. Yeah, it's like 5. Is it 5 years?
It's 10 years for swords and 20 years for two-handed swords.
Yes. Okay. And obviously, Hilmar got his 20-year double-handed longsword.
Yeah, he's anachronistic.
Does anyone else have one?
I don't think anyone.
Well, he's the oldest.
Yeah, he's the oldest, I think. We covered EVE Online's sort of unique selling points, USPs, and sort of discussed like the pros and cons of CCP's unique selling points. That was kind of like the main section of the show, and then obviously at the end we kind of discussed NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens, and digital goods, and Caleb kind of went on a rant as to sort of why he hates them, essentially.
Spot could do this as well, I'm pretty sure.
Could. I imagine so.
Consider.
I just thought NFTs were kind of interesting because Eve has a lot of unique moments, and it was interesting because I thought that bearing in mind people were selling NFTs about regarding unique moments in history. I thought it was kind of interesting from an Eve perspective, at least. But we have here on the show, as you can see in chat, we have Caleb here. Say hey, Caleb.
Hello, people.
And we also have Dr. Spodermain.
Hello.
Both staff members of TIS. A lot of skill knowledge and a lot of knowledge and depth.
I have great knowledge of skill.
You have lots of knowledge of skill. A lot of depth of knowledge in both of these guys. So we're going to basically cover. Sorry, was that Caleb?
I have 17 million skill points. Can I help?
We're basically going to be covering. So the quick synopsis of the episode, we're going to be basically covering Messner putting a pcgamer article out about EVE Online, which kind of brings us into different topics in terms of just general gaming as well. We're going to talk about the sort of EVE everywhere, and sort of the implications of that. Examples of sort of streaming, game streaming, good and bad, and the pitfalls in that. And then also we're going to talk about like the Mindstorm packs. What it's going to be kind of like a reoccurring segment of the third, with the sort of like the third segment of the show. It's going to basically be sort of like a quick conversation about microtransactions that we're going to probably end up doing and redoing constantly on this particular show, mainly because in terms of the game industry, sort of microtransactions, loot boxes, all that kind of stuff, like just general sort of creating wealth or creating sort of income as a game company is a very important thing, obviously. So it's going to be something that we're going to constantly talk about on this show.
and it's also if you thought Matterall's gold ammo discussion was bad, hold my beer.
Well, yeah. I mean, but we're not going to be. I don't think we're going to cross the boundary of advocating for it. Let's put it that way.
No, of course not.
Which is the important thing at the end of the day.
Maybe.
So let's get into the first subject. If you hadn't seen it yet, Messner put a pcgamer article, put an article out fairly recently. pcgamer article about the locations that you can visit in EVE Online, of all things.
Maybe we should do a little quick introduction of Stephen Messner, because I don't think we've done that ever on TIS. We just assume
Have we not?
that everyone knows who he is.
Oh, okay. Well,
I have no idea who that is.
I'm gonna need to Google it. I'm going to need to bring up some stuff about it. Well, I mean, you can get us started if you want.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, as many EVE players might have noticed, writing articles about EVE Online is a little bit. Well, let's just say that when non-EVE players and non-EVE media cover EVE stuff, it's usually speckled with massive amounts of mistakes and things that are completely out of context and does not make any sense to an EVE player that actually plays the game. There is a handful of exceptions to this. Some of the actual game journalists that have followed EVE for a long time. And of these, Steve Messner is actually one of them. And when he writes about EVE, at least it's not entirely wrong. So Steve is a really good guy, and many EVE players might actually also have met him at EVE meets because he does actually frequent those. So that's his background, basically. And I think he's been writing almost 10 years or more about EVE Online. So he is definitely one of the good sources. And in this case, he's done a massive, many words article about the locations in EVE Online.
Yes, yeah. And when I was trying to find, actually, we did quite some time ago. In actual fact, 2 years ago, we did a sort of a fairly significantly lengthy, an hour-long kind of like a discussion with Steve Messner, Andrew Groen, and that was with Carneris and Metal, actually. Let's see if I can bring this up and actually bring it up on the right thing. But yeah, essentially he's someone who has been keeping an eye on EVE for quite some time, writing articles in very notable publications about EVE Online, and keeping people sort of up to speed as to what's going on in EVE, sort of in a general sense, right?
Yeah, he's basically writing to the audience that you always see in the comments that go, "Oh, I've been following EVE for a long time, but actually never played it. The stories are always amazing." Like, okay, maybe you should try playing it.
Yeah. So he's the guy on the bottom left-hand side of the quad of people there. Obviously, you can tell you'll probably recognize at least one of those people here there. Carneris is obviously top left. Matterall's top right, and bottom right is Andrew Groen.
Was Matterall doing that from The Office?
He is doing it from The Office. yeah, that was a thing. And so the article, if I want to bring it up, is basically a sort of a nice sort of fairly casual kind of sort of article about the various different interesting locations that you can go inside of EVE. He brings up the Malaya Cemetery, how it developed from a player only thing, and how CCP's kind of put a new monument there. Talking about Cardia Say and her monument, the Honor Guard sort of monument in Amar Prime, Kriver's monument as well. as well as the Eve Gate. There's obviously various other things, Remains of Steve as well, and the BTEC Titan Maki monument, as well as Thera. So that's kind of interesting because there's obviously a bunch of other locations in Eve that are really kind of cool. Some of them notable in sort of kind of recently because CCP's been doing this whole Grand Prix thing, right?
Yep, racing and finding monuments.
And the interesting thing is those circuits kind of go past a whole bunch of different monuments. So they're almost like, is it like almost the checkpoints are in those monuments to some degree? So they're kind of really cool. I kind of thought it was kind of interesting because, in various different ways, games allow us to be able to sort of like experience like very unique or fairly unique kind of moments or experiences, right? I'm sure you've had sort of you've enjoyed various different experiences in various different other games as well, Caleb.
Well, I was actually going to segue onto the fact that the whole race thing felt like something directed by George Miller, and it should have been named Road Rage or something like that, because the amount of people that got killed in this thing is like ridiculous.
It is pretty crazy. Yeah, smart bomb traps are a bit brutal. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, didn't one of the systems actually break the record of amount of ships killed in one system in one day?
I'd have to check that. Like, as far as I didn't realize that that it may have, but I'd have to check that out for sure.
Which is kind of impressive if it did, because, well, that's a lot, right? It's.
I mean, I thought Nullsec has kind of, definitely set that record in the war in Delve, with the keep stars dropping and stuff, right?
Yeah, and you were showing me some numbers earlier about how many frigates have actually been killed in this war. And
it's insane.
It's a lot of frigates.
It's insane.
Something like, what, 30 or almost 50 trillion worth of frigates. Like, what?
It's absolutely ludicrous. Like, I mean, I don't know the true figure in terms of ISK, but I'm getting the impression that it might actually be close to the amount of ISK that's lost in Titan so far, which just is batshit insane.
You said around that the amount of actual frigates value-wise that Pappy has lost is the same as their Titan numbers. Like, wow. We've actually
according to some figures that have kind of, I would stress this, that like it did kind of break, like the sort of like the software sort of to calculate this broke, but the sort of the way that it's sort of lists the various different types, the groups of ships, seem to not break. So and it seemed as though frigates were above Titans. So it's pretty insane.
But we talk about broken data today. We've kind of covered that last week, and we're not supposed to talk about the war. So we're gonna zip it and
zip it. I was just kind of wondering if any of you two have kind of experienced any interesting kind of or unique experiences in other games that kind of memorable or stick in your mind in any way, shape, or form.
Not really.
I know kind of one. I've got one kind of interesting one, as it were. If anybody's played Assassin's Creed, I think it's Assassin's Creed Syndicate. I think it's Syndicate. I'm not entirely certain, but it's the one where you're in sort of I think it's like 17th century or 16th century France, in Paris, and it literally has like the Notre Dame Cathedral, like completely sort of pristinely recreated. The interesting thing about that is, obviously, I think it was like a year, maybe two. No, probably. I think it was about 2 years ago, right? They had fire. Sorry,
is that the one where you're racing yourself? Your weird shadow thing? Is that what you're thinking of?
No, I don't think so. I can't remember which specific Assassin's Creed it is. I think it's Syndicate, but I don't think it's, it relates to that sort of mechanic as such. But like, essentially, if you heard that Notre Dame basically had a fire and they burnt like half of it was basically burnt down. Apparently, the makers of Assassin's Creed, Ubisoft, like literally pitched in a whole bunch of information, surveys, details, all that kind of thing when they made the cathedral in their game to help with the sort of like the recreation and the rebuilding of it, which was really kind of cool.
I imagine they had probably laser scans and all kinds of crazy stuff in there.
Yeah, they had a whole bunch of interesting kind of stuff. See if I can find it. There's an insider piece. Just quickly jump to it. So yeah, like they offered up to 5,000 hours of research on the monument, and obviously they had laser scans of various different things, which was really kind of cool. There's one of the few things that a game that's sort of grounded in a degree of reality can help with in terms of in a real world situation. Obviously, there's no Cartier monument in real life. There's the Eve monument, obviously, in Iceland. But in an interesting way, there seems to be a lot more monuments in Eve that are kind of more worthwhile actually visiting than other sort of other games. Mainly because, like, it's a persistent world, and that's the important thing about it, right?
For me, one of the crazy. They weren't exactly monuments. There's an older game that I used to play called Worm Online, if you've heard of it. Think of it as like a really tedious Minecraft. But it's a very old game. Actually, Notch from Minecraft, I believe, worked on it at some point. But one of the things that's so impressive about it is how long it takes to build things. I don't remember the exact mechanics, but one of those that you could build these colossi, ginormous mega statues, and they took, and everything was all built sort of somewhat like Eve with full drop loot and things like that. So there's a lot of similarities in this game. But the thing about these colossi is they truly did take thousands and thousands and thousands of man hours to build. Like, as a comparison, I built myself a little wooden shack with a fence to keep my horse in it, and it took me about 3 months of real gameplay to build it. And there was just a marvel of that game of walking down roads that teams of people had spent months building to come to a bay with castles and these ginormous mega statues that somebody spent a disgusting amount of time building. I don't know what necessarily those monuments were to, but for me, it was the wonder of some nerd's got a lot of time on his hands.
That's crazy, actually, because there's a lot of games where obviously you have an ability to free build. Like, obviously one of the most prolific, one of the most notable games, sort of very recently, is obviously Valheim, right? Where everybody's like going all completely crazy about sort of being able to build, their kind of like their own little, sort of longhouse and stuff like that, right? But
It also kind of brings us full circle to the whole Titan thing, right? Because if you start thinking about how long and how many man hours was put into the early Titans in EVE Online, that's like comparable to these things, and we killed them. Let's not forget that, right? And even though it became cheaper and cheaper to build them, and easier and less man hours and all that stuff, we kept killing them, right? So, well, now they're not in a very healthy place, and we could have a lengthy discussion of this, but players want to do this. They want to build things and then kick them over.
But they also want to build. They definitely want to build something that's hard as well. Like that's something that's difficult to build, but not something that's just difficult to build for the sake of being difficult to build. There's a reason why the Palatine Keep Star hasn't been built yet, because there's literally no reason to build it aside from it being a difficult thing to build. There has to be obviously a reason to build it. And
it's kind of related to the whole thing. We did talk about USP last time and stuff like that, but I think it's a little bit valid to revisit this, right? Because you're saying that people like to build things. Not only that, they like to that whole the way of doing a difficult thing and then being able to stand back and look at it, and they are even, I think, willing to actually risk and sacrifice it. I think this is what EVE Online proves, that of course you can talk about psychological things like the sunken cost fallacy and all that stuff, but also this will to build something and even see it burn. I think that's very unique to this game. Of course, they don't want to necessarily see their stuff burn. It's better to see the neighbor's stuff burn, but it's definitely the core. I have to balance it, but it's the core of this game, right? The feeling of achieving something and then squandering it all away. It's almost like the reverse gambler's fallacy, right? Because we could start talking about what real addicted gambling is, because the addiction is actually not to winning; it's to losing.
Exactly. And we will for sure cover those topics. It is. I mean, we've kind of got that at the sort of end segment of the show, which is which we'll cover. We'll cover a little bit, but it is one of those things that is so vast and so intricate and so changing, ever changing in the game industry, that we're going to obviously be covering and talking about it consistently. But we're going to basically go to a quick break now, and we'll come in with the second subject, which will be...
just before you do that, can I just say that I'm going to do a little spoiler on that. I really, really want to talk about a topic on this show that you can go and Google yourself, so you get a little bit of a teaser. Mouse Utopia. Have fun.
Mouse Utopia. Oh God. Okay, well, with that in mind, you guys can go and Google Mouse Utopia if you want. I'm totally fine if you don't want to for any particular reason. But we'll go to a quick break and be back with our second topic, which will be about EVE Everywhere. Welcome back, guys. You obviously the last advert you saw there was for the obviously the EVE Grand Prix we were talking about previously. We're going to be discussing something that has a little thing that's that broke today. In actual fact, I believe, right?
Yep,
it was today. Like days mold together for me.
So about 2-3 days ago, we started kind of planning for this show. I started collecting things and trying to have a discussion of what to put on it. And then it seems like CCP had one of those hold my beer moments and just threw things at us. So we had to completely change the schedule.
I mean, to some degree, the reason why we have on Tuesdays and Fridays is kind of like to catch the sort of breaking news to some degree. But we always try and make sure that we have like one or two stuff that we've developed for the shows. On the off chance that there isn't too much. I think this week there wasn't really that much until today when it's begun to release a whole bunch of stuff. But this recent thing was basically Eve Anywhere, which is essentially you'll be able to at least they're basically opening up the beta for being able to play Eve Online on a browser to sort of a bunch more people. Like previously, it was very, very limited. It was like new players, and it was only select new players. But now it's...
And let's be fair, we've been warned about this. We've been kind of told that this was on the way at some point, and that they were looking into this kind of technology. And I'm pretty sure we covered this on TIS before. And I was wondering, well, is this going to come like end of the year? Because I thought this was something that they had practically shelved, especially because this is not really the only way of doing this, right? And of course, we had Eve Echo, so I think my brain had just kind of forgotten about it, but it's already a possibility, or has been for quite a while. I think this is something that Spot knows a bit more about than me.
Yeah, when they announced it, I actually expected it to come pretty soon after the announcement, because this is not to necessarily downplay the work that's gone into it, but it's something that is relatively easy to do when it comes to... it's far easier than it sounds, because it sounds like, Eve on a browser, that's going to be a million years of rewriting the game, right?
Yeah.
But no, it's just plugging into existing services like GeForce Now, Stadia. And this one actually in particular is probably closest to Microsoft's xCloud, because it's actually provided by Microsoft's Azure setup as far as we can tell.
Okay, that makes sense. So, because I was going to say, like, this does feel very much like it's like CCP hasn't sort of suddenly built a gaming server, like streaming service, like from the ground up. Kind of sounds like they're piggybacking on on an existing service. And I was kind of wondering like what service that could be, because it clearly wasn't GeForce Now and it clearly wasn't Stadia. So.
To be honest, that does sound like something CCP would try and do.
Well, like build it from the ground up.
Yeah, but I think my sort of tinfoil conspiracy is if you look into various articles, when they were messing with Hadian, it seemed like Microsoft was often getting involved, and I think some wires got crossed and some backroom chats were had, and then this was spawned.
I will say that my favorite thing about this whole thing was the tweet that I just linked, if you can get that up.
Okay.
Where someone pointed out, because I was one of the people that was screaming when they removed the in-game browser in EVE Online, because in-game browser had a lot of potential functionality that people were using for all manner of interesting things.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, we also had the EveGate project that I was also a fan of, and both of these things were just yanked out. I can understand why they yanked out the in-game browser. They had lots of good arguments with security and all that stuff, but still, the in-game browser was a really good service, and it made sure that the players could do stuff that meant that CCP didn't need to do it. And of course, that could segue us into a deep discussion about corporation finder tools and
third-party stuff
and all that stuff. But the point is that this tweet just made me a little bit happy, because it was like such a smiley thing. It's like, we used to have a browser in Eve. Now we have Eve in a browser.
Can you imagine if they brought a browser into Eve again, and you could play Eve in a browser inside of Eve?
Well, because they still have all those hooks, right? Spot, all the ones that basically take you out of the game client. So that basically means that when you're playing this on your tablet, and in a browser, it will feel seamless, right? You click it and it just opens a new tab. It's important that CCP then goes open new tab.
I don't know if they've actually implemented that for the web client. I'm assuming they would, because that's one of the main things to do. Because realistically, you could take pretty much any game ever and have it running on a service like this really quickly. But it's those adaptations that take time, like you say, making the game able to broadcast the fact that you clicked a link in the game, which, while it might seem similar to clicking a link on Google or whatever, it's mechanically very different. It has a completely different signal process that needs to get sent to your browser to say, now we got to open the web page. So there would have been quite a bit of work that had to be done, and there's probably quite a bit of work left to be done. But
now, I would like to point out that this isn't the only way that you can experience Eve in a browser, right?
Yeah, if you wanted to go all Inception on your idea of bringing back the in-game browser and playing Eve in Eve, then you could also play Eve in GeForce Now in Eve.
So well, I mean, you can't at the moment because they don't have the Eve browser inside of Eve, or the browser inside of Eve. But like, you can play Eve in using, GeForce Now at the moment, as far as I know. I've heard of people being playing it, kind of thing. I haven't experienced it. I don't have a GeForce Now account as such, and unfortunately, because of the way that CCP have kind of put together the sort of like the trial, beta trial, sort of for Eve Everywhere. Even if you use a VPN, you kind of it does do a check and to see whether you're, not just sort of like, not just whether your computer and your browser is up to spec kind of thing, but also that your sort of latency and that kind of stuff is up to spec for the experience. And if you're using a VPN, 9 times out of 10, you're basically going to be rejected because of that. So it's kind of like a US only thing at the moment, I believe.
But I do want to challenge. Can I just challenge CCP to do this on one of their machines? Put the in-game browser back and do what Spot just said. Do Eveception, where you're playing Eve in Eve, because that would just be hilarious.
How broke could that get? How quickly?
Massively broke.
The US only thing is most likely just because when you set up with Azure, which is, so that's the service that you're ultimately using, setting up different regions and different things has different costs. So while it's an experiment, they're probably just limiting it to one region just for costs and ease of management's sake. But the way Azure is set up for this, one of their main selling points is that you can hit a button and roll it out to insert continent here, everywhere.
Well, the really cool thing that I see for this is something that we had a long discussion about in the Discord the other night, was how CCP can actually use this to develop more services and products. And something like this could really be like an add-on where you pay some extra to have this as a service all the time. Ironically, a little bit like if you wanted market stuff on World of Warcraft once upon a time. Point is, many things that are in Eve right now, and you can almost call them minigames, could be sessions that you can now reach from this Eve in a browser, and you can then have it pretty much with you everywhere, right? That means that it can go on all your portable devices. If they then tweak the UI a little bit, I can then access something like the gambling features on the HyperNet. I can directly access only like market browsing from that client, and then it becomes sort of modular, right? I can then optimize the UI in small steps, so something like making PI an active game would not be game breaking because now you have this service, right? That means that instead of pulling it out, you can actually just keep it in, but access it from this.
You kind of touched on something that I thought was kind of interesting, because talking about the HyperNet, I am glad, very, very glad that CCP didn't sort of bring this out in the kind of like, we've re-envisaged the way that you can play games, and created a completely new sort of way of being able to play Eve, when in actual fact it's like, do you know what I mean? You're getting where I'm coming from, right? Like, thankfully they didn't package this the way that they packaged HyperNet, which was basically like, they claimed that they'd created a new paradigm, some kind of new paradigm for market trading, when in actual fact it was just, it was just raffles.
Dare I say, maybe this is a smooth segue, dare I say the players did that for them, because you've got one of the first things that happened when it was announced, and again when it was released today as a beta. It's just the wild speculation about how it works, which is, it's fair enough, but people assuming like, I saw a RuneScape bot that ran as a Chrome extension, so hacking's really easy, right? No, it's probably far harder. Like, one way to compare it would be like trying to hack somebody playing Counter-Strike by watching their Twitch stream. Like, it's just
actually that's a really good example in actual fact.
So what you're actually doing, this is probably the most layman way of explaining it, is you are watching a stream of Eve and just broadcasting your mouse and keyboard to it.
Yeah.
So there's no room, no additional room, shall we say, for cheating, and probably actually much less room, because most bots these days, they don't look at your screen. I've actually dug around and looked at a couple and seen how they work, and they actually, some of them, they turn the graphics off entirely so they can get more bots on a single computer. And it just reads your system's memory and figures out live from there what's going on in the game, and then does all of its evil bot things from there. So
if you're playing through a browser, I don't see this
being used by bots at all.
Yeah, because if you're playing through a browser, you don't have access to the system memory of the computer that you're watching and having your controls being sort of broadcasted to. So
exactly,
you would have to build a very, very good AI that does pattern recognition if you want to actually do a bot on this, right?
Yeah, I would like to ask.
It's harder to bot this way.
I would like to ask though, Spot, like, do you think that maybe CCP with Eve Anywhere, do you think that they'll be able to, develop negative latency?
You're an asshole.
I knew you were going to get that.
Just real quick, do you know what they actually meant and what they actually were doing with the negative latency system?
Please explain it to us, because like I see it as a buzzword, and I see it kind of like, so just
the long and short of what Stadia's negative latency is in most game services, your controller is connected to your TV, and then connected to the internet, then connected to the game. So there's several hops where you press A on your controller to jump, then there's a delay between that signal and your TV, and then there's a delay between your TV and the server, etc., 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 and which increase latency. What Google Stadia did is their controls actually have Wi-Fi on them directly, and your controller directly communicates with the server instead of going through your TV, through your route, through everything else. It's just, they just cut out a couple of the steps in the connection to your controller to the game.
So in the sense of the term negative and latency, they didn't mean negative latency. They meant bollocks. We've reduced, as in we've negated a bunch of steps that your
I'm confused
latency,
as to why they went for the word negative.
I know, it was kind of weird, right? But
slightly quicker doesn't translate to goes backwards.
Exactly. But Stadia caught some flack with that when they kind of when they released that particular sort of phrase, as it were.
It's almost as if you should not call something that it's not.
Exactly right. And so, just bring this sort of out into sort of like a more sort of general gaming industry sort of topic. Game streaming has kind of also had its fair share of controversy to some degree. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about Stadia. Spot is a bit of he's a defender of Stadia to some degree. He uses it, so he knows. I don't
subscribe anymore, I'll tell you that much.
He's used it, so he's more attuned to sort of the pros and cons of it than a lot of people are, because a lot of people will bash at Stadia without ever actually playing anything on it, used it as a service as such. So you've got more.
It's the only way that I consume certain games.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, the other more sort of well-known game streaming service is GeForce Now, and GeForce Now obviously has had controversy with having games on their service without really expressly telling the developers and the publishers that they had it on there, and that kind of, when they found out, they they got mighty angry about that.
I can sort of quickly link that concept, the fact that they were able to put games on the service without the original game developer knowing, shows what I meant when I said to create this EVE Anywhere, at least as a base concept, isn't that difficult. Because otherwise, you'd imagine you would need some real developer help to. If it was that complex, you'd think you would have to get the developer involved.
Yeah, I mean, I would think you would at least have to ask them about the fact that you're putting putting on there. Maybe they didn't expressly tell them quite what the service was about. I don't know, but it's kind of interesting in that regard. But I don't know whether we've discussed about the fact that the EVE Everywhere is or EVE Anywhere, sorry, is is basically a service that's sort of is basically sort of on the Microsoft, is it Microsoft Azure or Microsoft X, or is it?
I think xCloud is their branded version specifically for Xbox games. Yeah. So it'll be something Azure. I don't think they necessarily have a public brand name for it at the moment.
Okay. So, but it's understandable considering sort of CCP's relationship with Microsoft, the fact that they use Microsoft SQL servers, that kind of stuff. So they have a existing relationship there, but I don't think they're going to be. I don't think they're going to be using their service to stream other games in any way, shape, or form. Maybe other CCP products as they come out, kind of thing. But as a more sort of unified ecosystem.
It's a little bit surprising, actually, that they didn't go with Amazon, because Amazon has a very similar, if not near enough identical service. And CCP do already use Amazon for a lot of components of EVE, including the chat and whatnot.
Well, I think people are a little bit concerned about the chat kind of aspect of it. Just a real quick kind of...
I'd just like to point out on that. I think one of the things that I can imagine CCP has learned from experience is that it's good to have different service providers so you can actually say that you have a choice and you don't get locked in some horrible deal with one provider.
Yeah, very, very true. And with that, we'll obviously sort of continue the discussion in Discord after the show and stuff like that. But we'll go to a quick sort of break and a word from our sponsors and all that kind of jazz. And come back with the final part of the show. Hey, and we're back in. Welcome, guys, to the final section of the show. This section is going to be a pretty quick section because we've only got like 7 or 8 minutes, and there's no way in 7 or 8 minutes we're going to discuss the intricacies and the depth and breadth of game microtransactions in any way, shape, or form. But it's going to be a reoccurring sort of aspect of the show. So, but one way it's relating to Eve, this week at least, is that CCP released a kind of a sort of microtransaction which may have sort of implications. I don't know. There's hints of sort of slippery slope going on. But they released what was it? It was,
what did they call them?
Expert packs, right? Something
yes,
like that.
expert packs. I'm trying to find the
Master packs.
Master packs. Well, the point is that it piggybacks very nicely on the other thing with the leasing and rental of skill points and all that stuff, right? It's actually from, again, I'm going to be the bad cop here and say that I'm actually a little bit of a fan of this, because this shows that CCP is actually thinking marketing in a way that makes sense. They've been historically really bad at this. This looks to me like product development that's thought through, right? Where they actually see, okay, we have this
let's not
thing
get
that
ahead
we
of
can roll
ourselves.
out. No, okay, so, sorry, a little bit, but we have this service that we're going to roll out, and then we have this service that adds and ties into the other service. It's almost as if they can see that if you do these things, then people will start spending money and do it in a good way. And again, as long as the price points are fair, as long as it's not completely breaking the in-game ecosystem and economy, which it kind of does, I don't have a problem with it, right? So I'm of the opinion of monetize all the things, right? CCP, take my money, but give me something that I want, right? And don't break my game. And I will say that there's one thing that I do think CCP really needs to do with this. Stop giving away free stuff that is created by players in game. You really need to stop this. This is slippery slope. It ties into the whole problem with the insurance problems on Baby Eve. Stop doing it. Remove that thing. Give the players Plex instead so they can buy it from other players.
And obviously, just really quick.
I don't know if we've missed it or not, but yeah. Go on.
I was just going to say, just really quickly, you understand that Caleb is quite emotional, quite not emotional, quite passionate about this particular subject, because clearly, because he's a industry and market kind of guy. So
yeah, I'm biased. I'm massively biased. But again, it does destroy so many steps in the Eve economy and ecosystem, and you can see how big of a problem it is with the reaction from Eve Echoes. Stop doing it, CCP. Fix it.
Okay.
There is sort of there's half a defense of that, in that they did that already, and it's not an excuse, but it's like they've not really made it too much worse, in that you used to get, and you still do get, all of the ships that you can currently, shall we say, buy with these packs, you get for free during the career agents anyway.
But it ties into the whole argument with there's nothing for new industrialists to build. No, because they get it for free by CCP. Dumb.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you do have a good point there, Spot, in actual fact, because when you do go through the tutorial at the start, you do end up getting some freebies, as it were, that clearly wasn't produced by players, clearly wasn't sourced on the market, kind of thing. They could have sort of reforged, rechanged stuff going on in the new player experience to essentially instead of give you the item, instead give you, say, Plex that you can sell and then buy the item in a market kind of thing. Whether that's too much of an involved process for a new player, I don't know. But you do have a point as to the fact that they're giving a T1 exploration frigate on one of these packs. But you do get one of them in the new player experience anyway, to some degree, or you get something equivalent to that in new player experience anyway. So it's kind of like tit for tat, as it were, right?
Yeah, but just to make an important point here, right? You have this service that you are renting for 7 days. So now it is safe to say that handling things like what is called cyclicals in EVE Online is not just possible, it's easy peasy. So could you start putting this in the game? Because I would not have a problem with ventures that only last 3 days or 5 days, or even barges
just
that
blow
only
themselves up, do they?
that just disintegrate, or it's the equivalent of a rental that it is no longer available for you when that time is over, right? Because the point is, there's already tons of things in EVE Online that I think could be and should be cyclicals. Things like certain types of skins should be way more cyclical. Things like the enchantment stuff, make it cyclical. Stop letting this be a permanent thing, because it's game breaking and it messes up the ecosystem.
Well, my thoughts on that. Okay, yeah. Well, my thoughts on that in terms of cyclicals are less sort of based on just time, like time frame. I do kind of feel like there should be sort of like time framed stuff, and if CCP was able to create a functional rental kind of thing that players could also, sort of be able to utilize with each other, to each other, would be really fantastic as well. But I think in terms of the cyclicals that you're talking about, Caleb, like I kind of feel like they should be more micro transactions, and they should die when sort of ships die, kind of thing. So for example, player skins I don't think should be the cost that they are at the moment. If anything, the cost that they are at the moment, you should get a bunch of skins, like say a pack of 10 or a pack of 100, and essentially you can put those skins onto a ship and then fly those ships, and if they die, the skin with that particular ship dies as well. It kind of it to me it creates a more understandable and a more kind of a long-term microtransaction sort of scheme.
Try this on. When you buy those skins, they're BPOs, and you actually build with them.
That's an interesting way. I don't know. It would have to be really, really expensive though. Like the BPO would have to be amazingly expensive.
Doesn't matter if it's the permanent ones; they already are permanent. The whole thing is now these people that buy them can now make a little bit of a profit potentially, and there is a massive potential of competition. And if they're cyclical, then they get lost, they disappear, and they need to get renewed all the time. And then you can also see things like what's more popular between PvPers versus PvEers. I think it's worth experimenting with, because this would really be meaningful. And this ties into the whole thing of alliance skins and corporation skins and stuff like that, which I think we really desperately need.
There's a lot of issue, and I'd love to like talk to some CCP art guys about skins and like their the sort of like their whole kind of philosophy to skins and skinning, that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, we're kind of out of time. I told you that this topic is going to be like, we've only just even touched the surface of like the EVE side of this particular thing, let alone the entire industry kind of thing. It's going to be a reoccurring thing, but unfortunately that'll be the end of the show. We'll be in Discord sort of talking about this kind of stuff at the end of every show. So come check us out there on the TIS Discord. But thank you very much, everybody, for checking out the EuroShow. And we'll be back on Friday. Also, check out the US time zone show with Matterall later on today.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.